The moment I saw my son's name where mine should have been, my hands began to shake. Ethan sat
This is
across
just
from me
standard
at
procedure,
my own
Mama.
kitchen table, smiling as he explained
Are you sure
documents
this
he
is what
thought
we
I had never
discussed?
seen.
Yes, it just
He
authorizes
talked
the
about
transfer.
protecting me, helping me, taking care of my future. But 3 days earlier, hidden inside an old drawer that belonged to my late husband, I had already read every page. My inheritance had been moved. My home was being discussed. And my own son believed I was too old to understand what he had done. So I smiled, poured him another cup of coffee, and pretended I knew nothing. Because Ethan Marshall had stolen my inheritance. What he didn't know was that I had seen the documents first. If this story touches your heart, I'd love for you to stay with me until the end. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy stories about family truth and second chances. And while you're here, tell me how this situation makes you feel. Have you ever trusted someone who betrayed you? Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world tonight. The first year after my husband died felt like living inside a house that had forgotten how to breathe. Robert Marshall had been my husband for 42 years. He built houses throughout central Ohio, and although he never became a wealthy man, he was respected. People trusted him. He believed in handshake Sunday dinners and paying every bill before it was due. Most importantly, he believed that family came before everything else. When he died from a heart attack one cold November morning, it felt as though the walls of our home had collapsed around me. Our house sat on a quiet street outside Columbus, surrounded by maple trees Robert had planted when our son Ethan was still a boy. Every room carried memories. The kitchen still smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon because Robert had baked cinnamon bread every Sunday morning. His reading glasses still sat beside his favorite chair. For several months after the funeral, I barely left the house. Grief changes time. Some days felt endless. Others disappeared before I even realized they had begun. At 67, I had retired from teaching elementary school years earlier. Robert had always handled most of our investments and financial matters. I paid household bills and managed our daily expenses, but he took care of insurance policies, retirement accounts, and business paperwork. After his death, the stacks of folders inside his office terrified me. Every envelope felt like another reminder that I was alone. That was when Ethan started coming around. My son lived about 40 minutes away with his wife Lauren and their daughter Emma. Before Robert died, Ethan usually visited once every few weeks. He worked in sales for a medical supply company and always seemed busy. But after the funeral, everything changed. He began stopping by every Saturday. Sometimes he came twice a week. He fixed the leaking faucet in the kitchen. He mowed the lawn. He changed light bulbs. He brought groceries and carried heavy boxes to the garage. "Dad would want me taking care of you," he told me one afternoon. I remember standing beside him in the backyard while he repaired the old wooden fence. The sun was setting behind the trees. For the first time in months, I felt less alone. "I don't know what I'd do without you," I said. He smiled. "You'll never have to find out." At the time, those words comforted me. Looking back now, they make my stomach turn. Lauren also became unusually attentive. My daughter-in-law had always been polite, though we had never been especially close. She worked part-time at a real estate office and often seemed impatient with small-town life. Yet suddenly, she began calling me every few days. She asked about my health. She brought soup. She offered to organize my medications. "Daisy, you shouldn't worry about anything anymore," she told me one evening while washing dishes in my kitchen. "You've taken care of everybody your whole life. Let Ethan handle things now." I wanted to believe her. After all, grief makes people vulnerable. You reach for kindness wherever you can find it. Christmas arrived 6 weeks after Robert's funeral. The holidays felt impossible. For 40 years, Robert had hung lights along the roof. He always placed the star on top of the tree while Ethan stood below, pretending to direct him. That year, I couldn't even bring myself to unpack the decorations, but Ethan came over with Lauren and Emma. He carried boxes from the attic. Lauren decorated the tree. Emma baked cookies. For a few hours, my house felt alive again. After dinner, I found Ethan standing alone in Robert's old office. He was looking through one of the filing cabinets. "What are you doing?" I asked gently. He quickly closed the drawer. "Just trying to help organize Dad's paperwork." I nodded. At the time, it seemed reasonable. There were dozens of folders, insurance papers, tax records, investment statements, business documents. The truth is that I was relieved someone else was willing to deal with them. Several weeks later, Ethan suggested that we create a folder specifically for my finances. "You don't need all this stress, Mom." He spread documents across the dining room table. "I can help keep track of everything." I hesitated. Your generation learns to be independent. My mother handled her own bills until the day she died. Asking for help often feels like admitting weakness, but Ethan looked so sincere, so concerned. "I just don't want anyone taking advantage of you," he said. The irony of those words would not strike me until much later. As winter turned into spring, he became increasingly involved in my daily life. He knew when my insurance payments were due. He asked about my retirement account. He reminded me about property taxes. He offered to drive me to appointments. Sometimes he answered my phone if I didn't hear it ring. He even collected my mail whenever he stopped by. At first, I felt grateful. Then something strange began happening. I noticed he asked questions that Robert never would have asked. "How much is left in Dad's business account? What does your investment portfolio look like? Did Dad ever update his will? Where does the life insurance money go?" The questions usually came casually, over coffee, during dinner, while driving to the grocery store. I answered because he was my son. Who else was I supposed to trust? One afternoon, my friend Grace Wilson visited. Grace and I had taught at the same elementary school for almost 20 years. She had lost her husband 5 years earlier. As we sat on my porch, drinking iced tea, she watched Ethan loading boxes into his truck. "He certainly spends a lot of time here," she said. I smiled. "I'm lucky." Grace stirred her tea quietly. "Maybe." I looked at her. "What does that mean?" She hesitated. "Daisy, after Harold died, people suddenly became very interested in my finances." I laughed softly. "Ethan isn't like that." "I'm sure he isn't." But her expression remained serious. "Just make sure you know exactly what's happening." Her words irritated me. I felt protective of my son. After she left, I actually called Ethan. "You know Grace thinks you spend too much time helping me." He laughed. "People always have opinions." "I told her you were just looking out for me." He became quiet for a moment. "I am Mom." Then he added something that seemed harmless at the time. "You only have me now." That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone in Robert's chair. Rain tapped against the windows. The house felt unusually cold. For the first time, I noticed that many of Robert's financial folders had disappeared from the bookshelf in his office. Perhaps Ethan had organized them. Perhaps I had moved them myself. Grief can make your memory uncertain. I told myself not to worry. But as I walked through the silent house, I realized something else. Ethan seemed to know more about our finances than I did. More than he ever had before. And although I still trusted him completely, a small voice somewhere deep inside me had begun asking a question I wasn't yet willing to answer. Why had my son suddenly become so interested in everything my husband left behind? Spring arrived slowly that year. The snow melted from our front yard. The maple trees began to bloom again, and for the first time since Robert died, I thought perhaps life might eventually become bearable. I had started planting flowers beside the porch. The daffodils Robert loved were finally opening. Some mornings, I even sat outside with my coffee and listened to birds instead of crying. That feeling lasted exactly 12 minutes. The telephone rang at 9:18 on a Tuesday morning. I almost ignored it. Most calls these days were advertisements or automated messages. But something made me answer. "Daisy Marshall." The woman's voice sounded familiar. "Yes?" "This is Helen Brooks." For several seconds, I couldn't place the name. Then I remembered. Helen had been Robert's attorney for nearly 20 years. She handled our wills, our property paperwork, and eventually Robert's business contracts after he retired. "Oh, Helen," I said. "How are you?" There was a brief pause. "I'm well, Daisy. I was actually calling because I was concerned." My stomach tightened. "Concerned?" "Yes. We missed our appointment last Thursday." I frowned. "What appointment?" Another silence. "The estate review appointment. Your son called several weeks ago and scheduled it." I stood up slowly from the kitchen table. "There must be some mistake. He said you wanted additional time before signing the remaining documents." I felt cold. "What documents?" Helen sounded confused. "Daisy, weren't the papers delivered to your home?" "No." She hesitated. "I sent them nearly a month ago." I looked toward the front window. The mailbox sat beside the road. Ethan often brought the mail inside whenever he visited. "I never received anything." Another long silence. "I think perhaps we should meet." I agreed. After we hung up, I sat in my chair for almost 20 minutes without moving. It wasn't only the missing documents. It was the fact that Ethan had apparently spoken with Helen without ever mentioning it to me. Perhaps he had simply forgotten. Perhaps he was trying to help. I repeated those thoughts over and over. But for the first time, Grace's words returned to me. "Make sure you know exactly what's happening." That afternoon, Ethan stopped by unexpectedly. He carried grocery bags into the kitchen. "I brought chicken soup," he said. "Lauren made extra." I watched him carefully. He seemed completely normal, relaxed, comfortable, as if nothing had happened. "Ethan." "Yeah." "Did you talk to Helen Brooks recently?" For the briefest moment, something changed in his eyes. It disappeared so quickly that I almost thought I imagined it. "Oh, Helen." He set the groceries down. "Yeah, a few weeks ago." "Why?" He smiled. "Mom, I was just trying to help. She said there were documents." "Nothing important." I folded my hands together. "Why didn't you tell me?" He sighed. "You were having such a hard time after Dad died." "I still should have known." He walked over and sat beside me. "Dad handled everything. Suddenly you were alone. I didn't want to overwhelm you." He reached for my hand. "I'm your son." I looked at him. The same blue eyes Robert had. The same dark hair, though now touched with gray. The little scar above his eyebrow from falling off his bicycle when he was 11. How could I distrust my own child? "I'm sorry," I said. "You don't have to apologize. But I wish you'd told me." He nodded. "You're right." Then he stood up. "I'll call Helen and straighten everything out." His answer sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. That evening I went into Robert's office. The room still looked almost exactly the same. His desk, his leather chair, his framed photographs. But now that I paid attention, several folders were indeed missing. I opened drawers, searched shelves, checked filing cabinets. Some documents remained. Others were gone. Perhaps Ethan had organized them. Perhaps he had taken them home to review. Again, I told myself there must be a simple explanation. The following day, Grace came by with coffee. She immediately noticed something was wrong. "You look pale." I told her about Helen's phone call. She became very quiet. "What did Ethan say?" "He was helping. And he didn't want to upset me." Grace stared out the kitchen window. "Daisy, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you know exactly what your husband left you?" I laughed nervously. "No." "Do you know where all your accounts are?" "Mostly." "Do you know what papers Ethan has seen?" I didn't answer, because the truth was I didn't know. Not really. That realization frightened me more than anything else. For 42 years, Robert had taken care of those things. When he died, I simply stepped aside and allowed Ethan to take his place. Perhaps because I trusted him. Perhaps because I was tired. Perhaps because grief makes you surrender responsibilities you once carried. 2 days later, another strange thing happened. I checked the mailbox myself. Inside were advertisements, a utility bill, and a bank envelope addressed to me. That evening, Ethan visited. As we ate dinner, he asked casually, "Did any mail come today?" The question seemed innocent, yet something inside me noticed it immediately. "Just bills," he nodded. "Good." "Good." "Why?" "Good." After dinner, he walked through Robert's office. Again. He opened drawers, looked through papers, closed cabinets. "What are you looking for?" I asked. He smiled. "Dad always kept everything so organized." His answer somehow felt incomplete. As he prepared to leave, he stopped near the front door. "Oh, by the way, Helen may call again." "Why?" "She worries too much." He laughed. "I told her you weren't ready to deal with legal paperwork." I stared at him. "You told her that?" "Well, yeah. But you never asked me." His smile faded slightly. "I was trying to protect you." Protect me. Everyone seemed to be protecting me. Protecting me from paperwork. Protecting me from decisions. Protecting me from information. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I walked downstairs. The house was silent. Moonlight spilled through the kitchen windows. I sat at the dining room table where Robert used to pay bills. For the first time since his death, I opened one of his old desk drawers. Inside lay checkbooks, pens, receipts, business cards, and at the very back, I found a small yellow note written in Robert's handwriting. The ink had faded. It simply read, "Important documents, Helen has copies." Nothing else. No explanation. No details. Yet, my heart began beating faster. Why would Robert write that? Why keep such a note? The next morning, I called Helen. "Could we meet?" I asked. "Of course." "When?" "Anytime." I looked toward the front window. Ethan's truck was parked outside. He had arrived early to mow the lawn. For some reason, I lowered my voice. "Could we meet without Ethan knowing?" Helen was silent for several seconds. Then she answered quietly. "Yes, Daisy." After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen watching my son through the window. He moved confidently across the yard. The same yard where Robert had taught him to throw baseballs. The same yard where he had built snowmen. The same yard where Robert had once said, "Our son will always take care of you." I wanted to believe that, more than anything. But as I watched Ethan place something inside the bed of his truck, a small cardboard box from Robert's garage, I realized I no longer knew whether my son was protecting me or protecting something from me. I met Ethan at the bank on a Thursday morning. The sky was gray and a cold rain had settled over Columbus, even though it was nearly May. I almost canceled. Something inside me still felt uneasy after my conversation with Helen, but Ethan had sounded so confident on the phone. "It's nothing serious, Mom," he had said. "Just some paperwork. We need to make sure everything is organized." Organized. That word had become his favorite. When I arrived, Ethan was already standing near the entrance of First County Bank. He wore a navy suit I had bought him years ago for a job interview. He kissed my cheek. "You okay?" "I suppose so." He smiled. "This will only take 20 minutes. Inside, the bank felt colder than usual. The fluorescent lights seemed harsh. People sat quietly at desks while employees moved through the lobby carrying folders. Ethan guided me toward a private office. A woman sat behind the desk. She appeared to be in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled into a bun and reading glasses resting low on her nose. "Mrs. Marshall, it's nice to meet you. I'm Olivia Carter." She shook my hand warmly. Ethan sat beside me. Olivia opened a folder. "These are simply updates regarding account access and future management preferences." I looked at the papers. There were far too many pages. Legal language, small print, financial terms. The words blurred together. Ethan leaned toward me. "Nothing complicated." Olivia looked at me. "Would you like me to explain each document, Mrs. Marshall?" Before I could answer, Ethan spoke. "Mom gets overwhelmed with paperwork." I turned slightly toward him. "I can still read." He smiled quickly. "Of course you can. I just don't want you worrying." Olivia said nothing. She handed me the first page. I read the title, Authorization Form. The second page contained several paragraphs I didn't understand. The third mentioned account administration. I looked at Ethan. "What exactly is this?" He answered immediately. "It allows me to help you with banking matters if you need assistance." Just in case. I continued reading. The language seemed broader than what he described. I looked toward Olivia. She opened her mouth. Ethan spoke first. "It's basically emergency protection." For the first time, I noticed something unusual. Olivia was watching me carefully. Not Ethan. Me. As if she wanted to ask a question. As if she couldn't. I signed one document, then another. My hands shook slightly. After the third page, I stopped. "What does this one do?" Ethan sighed. "Mom, I just want to understand." "These are standard forms." Olivia finally spoke. "Mrs. Marshall, if you'd like additional time to review everything," Ethan interrupted. "She's fine." Silence settled over the office. Olivia glanced at me again. "Are you comfortable proceeding?" The question felt different. Not routine, not casual. I looked directly into her eyes. For a moment, she seemed to be asking something much larger. "Do you understand? Do you know? Are you certain?" I nodded slowly. "Yes." But the truth was, I wasn't certain at all. After the meeting, Ethan drove me to lunch. He chose a small diner Robert and I used to visit. He seemed unusually cheerful. "See, that wasn't so bad." I stirred my coffee. "What exactly did I sign?" He laughed softly. "You worry too much." I didn't understand several pages. Legal language always sounds complicated. He reached for a sugar packet. "If something happens to you, someone has to help." Something happens to me. The phrase stayed with me. I hope nothing happens. Of course not. He smiled. But we're planning ahead. That evening I called Helen. I went to the bank. She became quiet. With Ethan? Yes. Did you sign anything? I think so. Daisy, what documents? I don't know. There was another silence. You don't know? No. I suddenly felt embarrassed. Like a child. Like someone incapable of managing her own affairs. I trusted him. Helen spoke carefully. Can you obtain copies? I suppose. Daisy, please do. Her voice carried concern now. Real concern. After hanging up, I sat in Robert's office again. Rain tapped against the windows. The desk lamp cast shadows across the room. For the first time since his death, I opened the bottom filing cabinet. Inside sat old insurance papers, tax returns, property records. But something was missing. The folder labeled estate planning. I checked every drawer, every shelf. Nothing. The next day, Grace came over. She found me searching. What are you looking for? Robert's papers. The important ones. I nodded. They're gone. She sat beside me. Daisy. I didn't answer. Has Ethan had access to this room? Of course. How often? Several times. Grace folded her hands. I don't want to upset you. Then don't. But you need to hear this. I looked at her. When Harold died, my nephew tried something similar. I frowned. What do you mean? He started helping with finances. My heart beat faster. He collected mail. I said nothing. He organized paperwork. The room suddenly felt smaller. He said he was protecting me. I swallowed. What happened? Grace looked directly at me. He tried putting his name on my accounts. The silence between us lasted several seconds. Ethan wouldn't do that. Maybe not. He loves me. I know. She touched my hand. But people change around money. That night, Ethan called. How are you feeling? Fine. You sound tired. I've been cleaning. Oh, your father's office. There was a brief pause. What are you looking for? Just organizing? Another silence. Then he spoke casually. I already sorted most of those files. I noticed. You don't need all that paperwork? I stared out the kitchen window. I'd still like to see it. Mom, why? Because it belongs to me. His voice changed slightly. Not angry, just firmer. I'll bring over what matters. What matters? According to whom? After we ended the call, I walked outside. The air was cool. The neighborhood was quiet. Robert had always taken evening walks after dinner. As I stood beneath the maple trees, I suddenly remembered something. Several months earlier, shortly after the funeral, I had seen Ethan carrying a banker's box from Robert's office. At the time, I assumed he was helping. Now I wondered, what had been inside? The following morning, I drove back to the bank alone. I didn't tell Ethan. My hands trembled as I entered the lobby. Olivia Carter recognized me immediately. Mrs. Marshall, I need copies. Copies? The documents I signed. She looked toward the offices. Of course. She led me into a small room. As she gathered papers, she finally asked the question that had been hanging between us. Did someone explain everything to you? I hesitated. My son said it was routine. Olivia sat down. Did you feel pressured? The room became very quiet. I looked down at my hands. I trusted him. She spoke gently. Mrs. Marshall, these documents give your son significant authority regarding certain accounts. I looked up. What kind of authority? She hesitated. I believe you should review them carefully. My heart began pounding. Did I make a mistake? Olivia chose her words carefully. I think you deserve to understand exactly what you signed. She handed me the folder. As I looked at the stack of papers resting in my lap, one thought suddenly became impossible to ignore. My son had not taken me to the bank to protect me. He had taken me there because he needed my signature. And for the first time since Robert died, I began to wonder whether my greatest loss wasn't my husband. It might be my trust in my own son. I drove home from the bank with the folder sitting beside me on the passenger seat. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Every red light seemed longer than usual. Every mile felt heavy. I kept hearing Olivia's voice. You deserve to understand exactly what you signed. For 42 years, Robert had protected me from financial confusion. He never treated me as incapable, but he knew I hated legal documents and complicated contracts. Now he was gone, and somehow I had allowed another man, my own son, to take his place. When I reached home, I placed the folder on the kitchen table and made coffee. My hands were shaking so badly that I spilled cream across the counter. I didn't recognize myself. The old Daisy would have opened those papers immediately. The grieving Daisy wanted to hide from them. The folder remained untouched until evening. Around 6 o'clock, Ethan called. How was your day? Quiet? What did you do? Nothing important? He sounded relaxed. I might stop by tomorrow. All right. Everything okay? I looked toward the folder. Fine. He paused. You sound tired. I am. Get some rest, Mom. After we hung up, I finally opened the documents. Several pages mentioned account access. Others discussed management authority. One phrase appeared repeatedly. Durable power of attorney. I read it 3 times, then 4. Certain financial powers could be granted to another person. Another signature. My signature. I couldn't remember signing it. Perhaps I had. Perhaps I simply hadn't understood. The next morning, I called Helen. I think I signed something important. What kind of document? A power of attorney. She became silent. Daisy, did you request that? No. Did Ethan explain it? He said it was routine. Did you want him to have financial authority? I sat down. I don't know. Daisy, that isn't an answer. No, I whispered. I suppose it isn't. Helen asked me to bring copies to her office. We scheduled a meeting for Friday. I told no one, especially not Ethan. The following afternoon, I decided to clean Robert's garage. It had been months since I entered the back storage area. Robert spent countless hours there. He repaired furniture, sharpened tools, and organized every screw nail and wrench with almost military precision. Dust covered everything. Sunlight slipped through the small windows. I opened cabinets, moved old boxes, folded work blankets. Near the back wall stood Robert's old wooden workbench, the same one he built when Ethan was 10 years old. As I cleaned one of the drawers, something fell onto the floor, a small brass key. I recognized it immediately. Robert kept it attached to his office key ring for years, but I couldn't remember what it opened. I turned it over in my hand. Then I noticed a narrow compartment beneath the workbench, a hidden drawer. Robert had built secret compartments into several pieces of furniture over the years. He said construction workers trusted wood more than locks. My heart began beating faster. The key fit perfectly. The drawer slid open. Inside sat a brown envelope and a smaller metal box. For several seconds, I simply stared. My hands trembled. The envelope carried Robert's handwriting. Daisy. Just my name. Nothing else. I sat down on an old stool. Outside, wind moved through the trees. The garage suddenly felt very quiet. I opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of our will. Not the one I had vaguely remembered signing years earlier. A newer version. I recognized Robert's signature. Helen's witness seal. Dates from 2 years before his death. My eyes moved slowly down the pages. The family home, retirement accounts, savings, investments, everything. Everything had been left to me, completely. Ethan would receive his inheritance only after my death. I read the paragraph twice, then 3 times. There was no mistake. Robert had specifically written that I would maintain full control over every asset during my lifetime. My breathing became uneven. Because another memory suddenly returned. At the bank, one document had referred to transferring authority. Another mentioned account management. Another discussed property decisions. I opened the metal box. Inside were additional documents, insurance papers, business records, and one photocopy that made my blood run cold. It was another legal document, a power of attorney. Ethan's name appeared at the top. The date was only 3 months old. My signature appeared at the bottom. I stared at it. Was it my signature? Yes. No. Perhaps. I honestly couldn't tell. Grief. Medication. Months of confusion. How many papers had I signed? How many had Ethan placed in front of me? Tears filled my eyes. Not because of money. Not because of the house. Because of trust. Because somewhere between Robert's funeral and this moment, my own son had gained authority over things that were never supposed to belong to him. Then I noticed another folded piece of paper. Robert's handwriting. A letter. Only 1 page. My dear Daisy, if you are reading this, then I am no longer beside you. You are stronger than you believe. I know financial matters have always worried you, which is why Helen has copies of everything important. I love Ethan. He is our son, and I know he loves us. But he sometimes confuses help with control. Please, make your own decisions. Never let grief make them for you. Trust your heart, and remember that this house belongs to your memories, not to anyone else's plans. Love always, Robert. I couldn't breathe. I sat alone in that garage and cried harder than I had cried at the funeral. Because Robert somehow knew. Not exactly, but enough. Enough to leave warnings. Enough to protect me. That evening, Ethan arrived unexpectedly. He carried groceries. Lauren remained in the car. "You okay?" he asked. I had hidden everything back inside the box. The documents rested upstairs inside my bedroom dresser. "I'm fine." He looked tired, stressed. As he unpacked groceries, he spoke casually. "Lauren found a really nice retirement community." I froze. "What? Just looking?" "I don't need a retirement community." "Nobody said you did." He smiled. "But eventually, living alone becomes difficult." I stared at him. "This is my home." "Of course." His answer came too quickly. Lauren entered the kitchen. She sat down. "Daisy, there are wonderful places now. Activities, medical staff, social events. I'm not moving. She exchanged a brief glance with Ethan, a glance so small that someone else might have missed it. I didn't. Emma came inside moments later. The 14-year-old immediately hugged me. Then she said something none of the adults expected. Dad showed me pictures of your new apartment. Silence. Lauren's face changed. Ethan looked at his daughter. Emma. What? She asked. I felt cold. What apartment? Nobody answered. Emma looked confused. The place you said Grandma might move to. Lauren stood up. I think we should go. Ethan forced a smile. Nobody is moving anywhere. But I had already seen it, the fear in his eyes. For the first time since Robert died, my son looked nervous. As they drove away, I stood alone in the driveway. The evening sun was disappearing behind the trees Robert planted decades earlier. Inside my bedroom sat the document. Inside, my heart sat a truth I could no longer ignore. Ethan wasn't preparing for my future. He was preparing for my absence. And somehow, my husband had seen the possibility long before I ever did. After Emma mentioned the apartment, nobody spoke for several seconds. Lauren picked up her purse. Ethan cleared his throat. And my 14-year-old granddaughter looked around the kitchen with the innocent confusion of someone who had accidentally told the truth. Dad, Emma asked. It's nothing, Ethan said quickly. Lauren forced a smile. We were only looking at options. I looked directly at my son. For whom? He avoided my eyes. Mom. For whom Ethan. Emma lowered her head. I thought Grandma knew. No one answered her. A few minutes later, they left. I stood alone at the front door as their car disappeared down the street. The evening air felt colder than it should have for late spring. Inside my bedroom, hidden beneath sweaters in my dresser drawer, sat Robert's documents. The truth. And downstairs, sitting on my kitchen counter, remained the untouched flowers Lauren had brought. For the first time in my life, I looked at those flowers and wondered whether kindness could be used as camouflage. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and read Robert's letter again. Please make your own decisions. Never let grief make them for you. The words felt almost painfully personal. Because grief had made many decisions for me. Grief had made me stop asking questions. Grief had made me hand over responsibility. Grief had convinced me that needing help was the same as surrendering control. At 10 o'clock, Grace arrived. She immediately noticed my face. What happened? I told her about Emma, about the apartment, about the retirement community, about Robert's letter. Grace listened quietly. When I finished, she reached across the table. Daisy, they're making plans. I know. Without you. I looked down. I still don't understand why. She sighed. Maybe money, maybe fear, maybe control. I raised him better than this. Her voice softened. I know you did. That sentence hurt more than any accusation, because if I had raised him better, how had we arrived here? Later that afternoon, Ethan called. Mom, are you home? Yes. We'd like to stop by. We. I knew immediately that Lauren was coming too. They arrived carrying takeout containers. Lauren hugged me. Ethan kissed my cheek. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Almost too normal. We sat around the dining room table. Lauren spoke first. Daisy, we've been worried about you. I remained quiet. Ethan nodded. Living alone isn't easy. I've lived here for 37 years. But now you're alone. I looked directly at him. I wasn't alone until your father died. The room became silent. Lauren folded her hands. Nobody wants to upset you. Then why were you looking at apartments? Ethan exhaled. Emma shouldn't have said that. So she was telling the truth. Lauren spoke carefully. We simply wanted to prepare. For what? Ethan leaned forward. For the future. I could hear my own heartbeat. What future? He hesitated. If something happens to you, nothing has happened to me. You don't know that. The words landed heavily. I stared at my son. I'm healthy. You fell last winter. I slipped on ice. You take medication. So do millions of people. Lauren tried to smile. Daisy, this isn't about taking anything away from you. The sentence caught my attention immediately. Taking anything away. I had never used those words. Neither had Ethan. Yet somehow Lauren had. I looked at her. Who said anything about taking something away? She became quiet. Ethan answered quickly. Nobody. The conversation moved awkwardly afterward. We ate dinner. Lauren talked about work. Emma discussed school, but underneath every word I could feel tension growing. At one point, Emma asked if she could spend a weekend with me during summer. Before I could answer, Lauren spoke. We'll see where Grandma is by then. The words hit me like ice water. Where Grandma is. Not where Grandma lives. Not at home. Where Grandma is. That night, after everyone left, I walked through my house. My house. The words suddenly mattered. The living room where Robert proposed to me. The kitchen where Ethan celebrated his 16th birthday. The hallway where we measured his height every year. The guest room where Emma slept during Christmas. Could they really imagine me leaving all of this? The following Saturday, I overheard something I was never supposed to hear. Ethan had come over early to mow the lawn. Lauren stayed inside. I was upstairs, putting laundry away. As I passed the hallway, I heard them talking in the kitchen. The realtor said fall is the best time, Lauren said. We need Mom to cooperate. What if she doesn't? A pause. She'll eventually have to. My heart nearly stopped. And the accounts? Lauren asked. I've already handled most of it. Most of it? I stood frozen. The house is the biggest issue, Lauren continued. We can't afford another year. Another year. Afford. Suddenly, several pieces began fitting together. Their financial stress, their discussions, their urgency, their interest in my property. My hands shook. I returned quietly to my bedroom. For nearly 20 minutes, I sat on the edge of my bed. I wanted to believe I had misunderstood. I wanted to believe there was another explanation, but the words continued repeating in my mind. I've already handled most of it. Later, Ethan knocked on my bedroom door. You okay? Fine. You seem distant lately. I looked at him. My son. The little boy who used to sleep with a flashlight because he was afraid of storms. The teenager who cried when his first dog died. The young man Robert proudly helped through college. Where had he gone? Or had he always been here? I've been thinking about your father. His expression softened. Me too. He trusted you. I know. So do I. For a moment, something appeared in his eyes. Guilt. Fear. I couldn't tell. He sat beside me. You don't have to worry about anything. There it was again. The same sentence. The same promise. The same control hidden beneath kindness. That evening, Emma called. She rarely called me directly. "Grandma." "Hi, sweetheart." She sounded nervous. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For saying the apartment thing." "You didn't do anything wrong." "I thought you knew." I closed my eyes. "No, honey." She hesitated. "I heard Mom and Dad talking." "What did they say?" "They said the house would help." My heart sank. "The house?" "They said everything would be easier. Everything. Not my health, not my happiness. Everything." "Emma." "Yes." "Did your father seem upset?" She became quiet, mostly scared. After we hung up, I sat alone in Robert's chair. Outside, rain had begun falling. I looked at the photographs covering the shelves. Birthdays, vacations, graduations, Christmas mornings. So many years, so much love. And somewhere inside those years, greed had quietly entered our family. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, carefully, disguised as concern, disguised as protection, disguised as love. For the first time since discovering the documents, I realized something frightening. Ethan and Lauren were no longer discussing possibilities. They were discussing plans. And according to those plans, my future had already been decided. The only person who didn't know about it was me. The invitation came 3 days later. Lauren called on Tuesday afternoon. "We thought it would be nice to have dinner together Friday night." Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Ethan's cooking steaks. Emma wants you there." For a moment, I almost refused. Everything that had happened during the previous weeks still sat heavily inside me. The documents, Robert's letter, the conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. But then I thought of Emma, and I thought of something Helen had said during our last phone call. Sometimes people reveal the truth when they believe you know nothing. So I agreed. Friday evening arrived warm and quiet. The sun was setting as I drove to Ethan and Lauren's house. Their neighborhood had always felt different from mine. Newer homes, wider streets, large garages. Ethan opened the door. "Mom." He hugged me. For a moment, he felt like my son again, the little boy who once waited by the window for me to come home from school. Lauren greeted me politely. Emma ran downstairs. "Grandma!" She hugged me tightly. That embrace became the only genuine thing I experienced all evening. Dinner seemed pleasant at first. Steaks, baked potatoes, salad, soft music playing from the kitchen speaker. Lauren talked about work. Emma discussed school. Ethan opened a bottle of wine. Then the conversation changed. Lauren looked at me. "Daisy, have you thought any more about getting help around the house?" I carefully placed my fork down. "What kind of help?" "Oh, cleaning services, assisted living options eventually." Emma lowered her eyes. Ethan took a sip of wine. "Mom, you don't have to do everything yourself." "I've managed for decades." "You're getting older." The sentence landed heavily. I smiled politely. "So are you." Lauren laughed awkwardly, but Ethan didn't. "I'm serious." "So am I." He leaned back in his chair. "Dad handled most things." I felt something tighten inside my chest. "Your father trusted me." "But he also protected you." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" He hesitated. "You've never really understood finances." The room became quiet. Emma stopped eating. Lauren avoided my eyes. I heard Robert's voice inside my memory. "Your mother is stronger than she knows." I folded my hands. "I managed our household for 42 years. Ethan sighed. Mom, paying utility bills isn't the same as managing investments. The words hurt, not because of what they meant, because of who said them. This was my son, the child I had stayed awake with during fevers, the young man whose college tuition Robert and I struggled to pay, the boy who once cried because he thought he had disappointed me, and now he spoke to me as though I were a child. Lauren finally joined him. Ethan is only trying to help. I looked at her. By deciding where I should live, no one has decided anything. But you've discussed it. Silence. Emma spoke quietly. You did. Lauren immediately answered. Emma, what you said Grandma would be safer. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Can we not do this tonight? I looked directly at my son. When exactly were you planning to tell me? His expression hardened. Tell you what? That you've been making plans for my future. He leaned forward. Dad is gone. The sentence stunned me. I know he's gone. You don't understand how difficult this is. My voice became softer. For whom? For everyone. I stared at him. Or for you. The room felt smaller. Lauren crossed her arms. Daisy, nobody is attacking you. Then why do I feel like I'm defending myself? Nobody answered. Ethan finally spoke. You know what, fine. He put down his glass. Mom, you shouldn't be handling financial decisions alone. I remained silent. You get confused. I do not. You signed documents and didn't even remember. My heartbeat quickened. You knew that. He immediately realized his mistake. The room went still. How do you know what I remember? I asked. He looked away. You said so. No, I didn't. Lauren spoke quickly. Daisy. I raised my hand. No. I looked directly at Ethan. How do you know what documents I remember signing? For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he shook his head. This is exactly what I mean. What do you mean? You're becoming suspicious of everyone. The words cut deeply because they sounded dangerously close to another accusation. Confused, forgetful, paranoid, old. Lauren spoke softly. We're worried about you. Emma suddenly stood up. Grandma isn't confused. Everyone turned toward her. Emma. No. She looked at her father. You talk about Grandma like she isn't here. Nobody spoke. The 14-year-old looked close to tears. Grandma remembers everything. Lauren gently reached for her daughter. Sit down. But Emma continued. Grandpa trusted Grandma. Those words filled the room. Robert trusted Grandma. I felt tears forming behind my eyes. Not because I was hurt, because somebody in that room still saw me, still respected me. Ethan stood up. Emma, enough. She sat down quietly. Nobody spoke for nearly a minute. The sound of silverware against plates had stopped. The music in the kitchen seemed strangely loud. Finally, Ethan looked at me. I'm trying to protect you. There it was again. The same sentence, the same justification, the same excuse. I looked directly into his eyes. What exactly are you protecting me from? He didn't answer. Because perhaps he didn't know. Perhaps he had repeated that phrase so many times that he actually believed it. After dessert, Lauren cleared the table. Emma disappeared upstairs. Ethan and I stood alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet. For a brief moment, I saw exhaustion on his face. Real exhaustion. Dark circles beneath his eyes. Stress. Fear. Whatever problems he carried had become larger than I realized. but that did not excuse what he was doing. Mom? Yes. I need you to trust me. The irony almost broke my heart. Because trust had never been the problem. Trust was exactly what had brought us here. I looked at him. I have trusted you. His eyes lowered. When I left that evening, Emma walked me to my car. She hugged me tightly. I'm sorry. You don't have anything to apologize for. She looked worried. Are you okay? I smiled. I will be. As I drove home, tears finally came. Not because Ethan had embarrassed me. Not because he treated me like a child. But because I realized something painful. My son no longer saw me as his mother. He saw me as a problem to solve, an obstacle, a responsibility, perhaps even an asset. Yet during that entire dinner, I never told him about Robert's documents. I never mentioned Helen. I never spoke about the bank. I never revealed that I knew far more than he believed. Instead, I allowed him to think I was hurt, confused, afraid. Because for the first time in months, I understood something important. Ethan believed I was weak, and that belief would become my greatest advantage. As I parked in my driveway, I looked at the dark silhouette of my house. Robert's house, my house, the house they were already planning to sell. Inside, my purse rested the copies from the bank. Inside my bedroom sat Robert's letter. And inside me, something had finally changed. I was no longer simply grieving. I was preparing. The following Monday, I lied to my son for the first time in my life. Ethan called around 8 that morning. What are you doing today? I stood in my kitchen holding a cup of coffee. Nothing much. You staying home? Probably. He sounded relieved. I may stop by later. All right. After we hung up, I looked at the clock. 9:30. My appointment with Helen Brooks was at 10. I felt guilty for lying. Even after everything that had happened, some part of me still felt responsible for protecting my son from disappointment. But another part of me, the part Robert had spoken to in his letter, finally understood that protecting Ethan and protecting myself were no longer the same thing. I drove to Helen's office on the other side of Columbus. The building had not changed in 20 years. Red brick walls, small brass signs, the same oak tree outside the entrance. Robert and I had walked through those doors many times. The last time had been 2 years before his death. Helen greeted me personally. Daisy, she hugged me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She had known Robert almost as long as I had. I miss him, she said softly. So do I. Her office felt warm. Books lined the walls. Family photographs sat on her desk. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. She poured coffee. Then she looked directly at me. Tell me everything. So I did. The missing mail, the bank visit, the papers, the retirement community, Emma's comments, the conversations I overheard, Robert's letter, the hidden drawer. By the time I finished, tears were running down my face. Helen handed me tissues. Daisy, I need to ask you some difficult questions. All right. Have you willingly given Ethan control over your finances? No. Did you ask him to obtain power of attorney? No. Did you fully understand what you signed? I lowered my eyes. No. She nodded slowly. That's important. I handed her the copies from the bank. She spent nearly 20 minutes reviewing them. The room became very quiet. She read every page carefully. Occasionally, she made notes. At one point, she removed her glasses and looked at me. When exactly did you sign these? About 3 weeks ago. And Ethan brought you there? Yes. She continued reading. Several minutes later, she exhaled slowly. What is it? She folded her hands. Daisy, these documents give Ethan considerable authority. My stomach tightened. How much authority? He could access certain financial information. She turned several pages. He could participate in account management decisions. My hands began to shake. And this? I pointed to another page. She read silently. This concerns property matters. My house. Potentially. The room suddenly felt smaller. I looked at Robert's wedding ring on my finger. What does that mean? It means these documents should never have been signed without complete explanation. I swallowed. Did I lose my house? No. Did I lose my inheritance? No. My breathing slowed slightly. But she looked at me carefully. But someone was trying to obtain authority. The words landed heavily. Someone. Not Ethan. Not yet. Someone. As if even Helen struggled to believe my son could do such a thing. I removed Robert's letter from my purse. Then I handed her the copy of the will I had found. Helen's expression changed immediately. I remember this. She opened the document. Robert was very specific. What do you mean? He wanted you protected. She pointed towards several sections. Everything belongs to you during your lifetime. I felt tears forming. He worried about Ethan. Helen became quiet. After several seconds, she answered carefully. Robert loved Ethan. I know. But he was concerned about his financial decisions. I stared at her. What kind of decisions? He asked me not to discuss details unless necessary. Is it necessary now? She looked out the window. I believe it may be. She opened a file cabinet. After several minutes, she returned carrying an old folder. Several years ago, Robert helped Ethan with debt. I felt my heart sink. What kind of debt? Credit cards. She paused. A failed investment. How much? More than $50,000. I couldn't speak. Robert had never told me. Ethan promised to repay him. Did he? Helen shook her head. No. The silence felt endless. My son. My responsible son. My successful son. The one who insisted he was protecting me. Had Robert known all along, Helen reached across the desk. Daisy, I don't believe Ethan necessarily intended to hurt you. The sentence surprised me. Then what? She sighed. Sometimes people convince themselves they're entitled to something. The word stayed with me. Entitled, not stealing, not taking, simply believing something already belongs to them. Around noon, Helen suggested we visit the bank. I'd like someone else to review these documents. We drove together. Olivia Carter met us privately. She looked relieved to see me with Helen. After reviewing the paperwork, Olivia spoke carefully. Mrs. Marshall, there were several moments during your meeting that concerned me. What moments? You seemed uncertain. I nodded. I was. She looked uncomfortable. Your son answered several questions on your behalf. Helen asked. Did Mrs. Marshall appear to understand the documents? Olivia chose her words carefully. Not entirely. I felt embarrassed, but Olivia continued. That's not unusual. Many people need explanations. She looked directly at me. The problem is that you weren't given the opportunity. The room became quiet. Helen asked another question. Were there any unusual requests? Olivia hesitated. Certain account inquiries had already been made. I looked up. What inquiries? She opened her computer. Questions regarding transfers, access rights, and future authority. By whom? Olivia lowered her voice. Your son. The words hurt, not because I was surprised, because hearing them aloud made them real. After leaving the bank, Helen drove me home. Before I got out of the car, she turned toward me. Daisy. Yes. You are not powerless. I looked at her. You have the law on your side. She handed me copies of several documents. And you have evidence. My voice trembled. I don't want to destroy my son. You don't have to. Then what do I do? Helen answered quietly. You protect yourself. That evening, I sat alone in Robert's office. The sun disappeared beyond the trees. His letter rested beside me. The documents sat neatly arranged. For the first time in months, I understood exactly where I stood. The house was mine. The inheritance was mine. The decisions were mine. Yet the greatest shock was not financial. It was realizing that my husband had anticipated this possibility years before. Robert had seen something. Not evil, not cruelty, but weakness. And weakness mixed with money can become something dangerous. Around 7 o'clock, my phone rang. Ethan. I stared at the screen. For several seconds, I considered ignoring him. Instead, I answered. Hi, Mom. His voice sounded cheerful. How was your day? I looked at the documents on Robert's desk. The evidence, the truth, the future. And I answered exactly as he expected. Oh, quiet. You stay home all day. Yes. The lie came surprisingly easily, because Ethan still believed I knew nothing. He still believed I was grieving, confused, dependent. He still believed he had time. What he didn't know was that for the first time since Robert died, I was no longer standing alone. I had Helen. I had Olivia. I had Robert's words. And somewhere inside me, I had finally found the woman my husband always believed I could be. For several days after meeting Helen, I barely slept. The house felt different now. Not because anything had physically changed, but because I had begun seeing it through Robert's eyes. Every drawer, every cabinet, every folder suddenly seemed to carry pieces of a conversation he and I had never finished. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I returned to the garage. The hidden compartment remained open. Robert's letter rested inside the metal box. The copies of the will lay exactly where I had found them. But something continued bothering me. The box felt heavier than it should have. I lifted the bottom tray. Underneath sat another envelope. Smaller, older. Across the front in Robert's handwriting were 4 words. If necessary, read this. My hands began shaking. For several minutes, I simply stared. Part of me wanted to put it back, because opening it meant accepting that Robert had prepared for something he never told me about. Eventually, I broke the seal. Inside were several documents, bank statements, loan agreements, copies of checks, and another handwritten letter. I sat down on the old stool in the garage. Outside, rain tapped against the roof. The entire world seemed quiet. My dear Daisy, if you are reading this, then circumstances may have become difficult. I pray that they never do. I love our son. Nothing written here changes that. But over the years, Ethan has struggled with money more than he allows people to see. He is proud. He hides problems. And sometimes he believes that tomorrow's money can solve today's mistakes. I have helped him several times. I do not regret helping him. But I worry that after I am gone, he may see our assets as his solution. Please remember this. Everything we built was meant to support you first. Only you can decide what happens afterward. Love, always, Robert. I read the letter twice, then a third time. My eyes filled with tears. Not because Robert had been right, because he had carried this burden alone. I opened the remaining papers. The first was a bank loan, $30,000. Ethan Marshall. The second showed Robert had paid off several credit cards. Another document involved an investment loss, nearly $20,000. My breathing became shallow. I remembered Ethan telling us years earlier that he had experienced a rough business deal. That was all he had said. Robert never explained further. Apparently, he had protected Ethan, and he had protected me from worrying. One check caught my attention. The memo line read, "Final assistance." Final. The date was 3 years before Robert died. My husband had drawn a line. But had Ethan accepted it, I heard footsteps behind me. I nearly jumped. Grace stood in the garage doorway holding an umbrella. "Daisy?" I quickly wiped my eyes. "What happened?" I handed her the letter. She read quietly. When she finished, she sat beside me. "He knew." "I think so." "He was trying to protect you." I nodded. "Why didn't he tell me?" Grace looked at Robert's workbench. Maybe he hoped he was wrong. That possibility somehow hurt the most. Because Robert loved Ethan. He had always defended him, always believed he would mature, always believed things would improve. And perhaps they had, at least for a while. That evening I called Helen. "I found more documents." She came to the house the following afternoon. We sat in Robert's office. I showed her everything, the debts, the checks, the letter. She examined each document carefully. "These are legitimate. So Robert really paid his debts." "Several times." I looked toward the window. "Why didn't he tell me?" "He asked me not to." "Why?" Helen sighed. "He didn't want to damage your relationship with Ethan." My chest tightened. Even after death, Robert was still trying to protect both of us. Helen placed the documents into neat piles. "There is something else." "What?" "Several years ago, Ethan asked Robert about changing the estate." I stared at her. "What?" "He wanted earlier access." My voice barely worked. "Robert said no?" "Did they argue?" "A little." I looked down at my wedding ring. "He never told me." "No." The room became quiet. Outside, leaves moved gently in the wind. For 42 years, I thought Robert told me everything. Perhaps he had simply wanted peace. Or perhaps he had hoped Ethan would eventually change. Before leaving, Helen asked an important question. "Daisy, what do you want?" The answer surprised me. "I want my son back." Her expression softened. "And if that isn't possible," I didn't answer, because I didn't know. That weekend, Ethan visited unexpectedly. He brought groceries. He fixed a loose cabinet hinge. He asked about my health. He behaved exactly as he always had, and somehow that made everything worse. Because now I could see the contradictions, the kindness, the secrecy, the concern, the control. As he repaired the cabinet, I watched him, 42 years old. Gray beginning to appear near his temples, the same hands Robert once taught to hold a hammer. Could this really be the same little boy who cried when he accidentally broke my favorite vase? He looked up. "What?" "Nothing." "You've been quiet lately." "I'm thinking." "About Dad." "Yes." He nodded. "I miss him too." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke me. Because I believed him. I still believe him. Ethan loved his father. He loved me. The tragedy was that love and greed had somehow become tangled together. That evening, Emma called. Grandma? Hi, sweetheart. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you mad at Dad? I sat quietly. No. He seems worried. My heart tightened. Worried about what? I don't know. She hesitated. I heard him and Mom talking. What did they say? They said Grandpa left things differently than they expected. I closed my eyes. Differently than they expected. Not differently than they wanted. Differently than they expected. Which meant Ethan had assumed something. Perhaps for years. Perhaps ever since Robert became ill. Maybe he believed the house would become his. The accounts. The investments. The property. Maybe he had already spent those things in his mind. And when Robert left everything to me, disappointment became entitlement. Entitlement became pressure. Pressure became control. And control eventually became deception. That night, I returned to Robert's office. I placed his letters beside his photograph. The man in the picture smiled exactly as he always had. Steady, calm, reliable. For the first time since his death, I spoke aloud. You knew. The room remained silent. I wish you had told me. A tear slipped down my cheek. Then I smiled, because perhaps he had told me, not with words, but with letters, hidden drawers, copies, instructions, warnings. Robert had spent his final years building one last thing, not a house, not a business, but a way to protect me. And now, months after his death, I finally understood what he had been trying to say. He trusted me, even when I didn't trust myself. And somewhere beyond grief, beyond betrayal, beyond fear, I began to feel something I had not felt in a very long time. Strength. By the middle of June, the atmosphere around my family had changed completely. Nobody said it directly. Nobody admitted anything. But every conversation somehow returned to my house. The roof, the maintenance, the stairs, the yard, the taxes, the neighborhood. Everything suddenly became a problem that needed solving. And somehow the solution always seemed to involve me leaving. One Tuesday afternoon, Ethan arrived carrying a folder. He looked exhausted. The dark circles beneath his eyes had become deeper. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He sat at my kitchen table. I've been thinking. I poured coffee. So have I. He forced a smile. Mom, this house is too much for you. I said nothing. The repairs alone are expensive. I've managed. The roof needs work. Eventually. The plumbing is old. So am I. He didn't smile. I could see tension building behind his eyes. For several minutes we sat in silence. Then he opened the folder. Inside were brochures, retirement communities, senior apartments, assisted living facilities, photographs of smiling elderly couples, gardens, activity rooms, swimming pools. He spread them across my kitchen table. I just want you to look. I looked at him. Not the brochures, not the buildings. My son. Have you already chosen one? He hesitated. Lauren likes Maple Grove. And you? I think it's nice. I folded my hands. How much does it cost? He seemed surprised. What? The apartment. He looked down at the brochure. About $3,800 a month. Plus fees? Some. I nodded. And how would I pay for it? He swallowed. Well, after selling the house, there it was. The sentence neither of us had spoken aloud. After selling the house. I looked around my kitchen. The clock Robert bought on our 20th anniversary. The curtains I had sewn myself. The table where Ethan had done homework. The room where my husband and I had shared 42 years of breakfasts. Sell the house. As if memories could be placed on the market. As if grief could be packed into boxes. As if love had a price. I'm not selling. His jaw tightened slightly. You haven't even thought about it. I've thought about nothing else. He leaned forward. You can't stay here forever. I answered quietly. Neither can you. He stood up. For the first time in months, I saw anger. Real anger. Dad wouldn't want you alone. I looked directly into his eyes. Don't speak for your father. The room became silent. He lowered his voice. I'm trying to help. I know. Then why are you fighting me? Because you aren't asking. Because you've already decided. Because you've made plans. Because you're treating me like I'm already gone. But I said none of those things. Instead, I simply answered, because this is my home. He left shortly afterward. The coffee sat untouched. The brochures remained on the table. That evening, I called Helen. He brought retirement brochures. She wasn't surprised. And he wants me to sell. What do you want? I want Robert back. She smiled softly through the phone. I know, but that's not possible. No. What is possible? I looked around the living room. I want my choices. And you still have them. After hanging up, I walked into Robert's office. His photograph stood on the bookshelf. Sometimes I found myself talking to him, not because I expected answers, but because silence had become too heavy. I don't know what to do. Of course, no answer came. Yet my eyes drifted toward the small metal box. Inside sat his letters, his warnings, his trust. And slowly I realized something. Robert had never asked me to save Ethan. He had only asked me to protect myself. The following week, Lauren visited alone. That itself felt unusual. She brought lemon cake. She complimented my garden. She spoke kindly. For nearly an hour, we avoided every difficult subject. Then, finally, she sighed. Daisy, can I be honest? I nodded. Ethan is worried. About me. About everything. I waited. She looked down. His company isn't doing well. My heart sank. What happened? Sales dropped. She twisted her wedding ring. There have been layoffs. I suddenly understood. Not everything, but enough. The debts, the pressure, the urgency, the house. Is he in trouble? She didn't answer directly. We've had a difficult year. I looked at her carefully. How difficult? Tears appeared in her eyes. I don't know anymore. For the first time, Lauren didn't seem manipulative. She seemed frightened, and perhaps that frightened me even more. Because fear makes people justify things they would never normally do. She finally said, he thinks this house could solve everything. The words sat heavily between us. Not my happiness, not my future, not my safety. The house. I spoke quietly. This house isn't a solution. She wiped her eyes. I know. Does Ethan She couldn't answer. 3 days later, another surprise arrived. Michael Turner, the local real estate agent. I knew him. Robert had worked with him years earlier. His business card sat in my mailbox. I called the number. "Mrs. Marshall," he said warmly. "I was told you might be considering selling." My heart stopped. Told by whom? There was a pause. "I assumed your son had spoken to you." I closed my eyes. "No." His voice changed immediately. "Oh. When exactly did you speak with him?" "A few weeks ago." "A few weeks, before our arguments, before Emma's comments, before I discovered Robert's letters. He had already contacted a realtor." I thanked Michael and ended the call. For several minutes, I sat completely still. Then I called Helen. "He contacted a realtor." Her voice became serious. "When? Several weeks ago." "Did you authorize that?" "No." She was silent. "Daisy, I think you need to prepare." "For what?" "For the possibility that Ethan believes this process is already moving forward." That evening, Ethan called. His voice sounded tired. "How are you?" "I'm fine. I was thinking maybe we could meet Saturday." "Why?" "We should talk." "About the house?" Silence. "Partly." I looked out the kitchen window. The maple trees swayed gently. Robert had planted them when Ethan was 5 years old. Each one marked a year of his childhood. One tree for kindergarten, one for Little League, one for middle school, one for high school. How strange that the very yard where my son grew up had become something he now measured in property value. "I'll come Saturday," he said. "All right." After we hung up, I opened Robert's final letter again. "Please make your own decisions. Never let grief make them for you. For months, I had been grieving. For weeks, I had been afraid. But now, another feeling had begun replacing both. Determination. Because somewhere, somehow, my son had already decided to sell my future. He had contacted realtors, researched facilities, made plans, calculated numbers, and yet there was one thing he still didn't know. I had seen the documents. I knew about the debts. I had spoken to Helen. I had met with Olivia. And when Saturday finally arrived, I intended to listen carefully. Because for the first time since Robert died, I was no longer the woman everyone believed I was. I wasn't confused, I wasn't helpless, and I certainly wasn't finished fighting for my home. Saturday arrived with heavy clouds hanging over the neighborhood. I woke before sunrise. For several minutes, I sat at the kitchen table holding Robert's final letter. The paper had begun to soften from being unfolded so many times. Please make your own decisions. Today, I intended to do exactly that. At 11 o'clock, Ethan arrived. He came alone. No Lauren, no Emma, only my son. He carried a folder beneath his arm. For some reason, seeing that folder immediately made me uneasy. He sat down at the kitchen table. The same table where he had done homework. The same table where Robert had balanced our checkbooks. The same table where we had celebrated birthdays, graduations, and holidays. Now it felt like a negotiation room. "Coffee?" I asked. "Sure." Neither of us spoke while I prepared it. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The air felt heavy. Finally, Ethan opened the folder. Inside were papers, charts, financial estimates, printed photographs of retirement communities. He slid them toward me. "I've done some calculations." I remained silent. "If the house sells at current market value," I interrupted him. "I'm not selling." He exhaled slowly. "Mom." "No?" He leaned back. "You haven't even looked." "I don't need to." "You're being stubborn." The word surprised me. Stubborn, not grieving, Not uncertain, stubborn. I looked directly at him. When did you decide to sell my house? His expression changed. What? You spoke with a realtor. His eyes widened slightly. Who told you that? Does it matter? His silence answered the question. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Rain began falling against the windows. Finally, he said quietly, I was exploring options. For whom? For you. No. I shook my head. For yourself. His face hardened. That's unfair. Is it? He stood up and walked toward the window. You don't understand our situation. There it was. Finally, our situation. Not mine, theirs. I spoke softly. Then help me understand. His shoulders lowered. For the first time in months, he looked tired. Truly tired. My company cut commissions. I listened. We fell behind. He stared outside. The mortgage increased. How much? He didn't answer immediately. We borrowed money. My heart sank. How much money? A lot. I remembered Robert's letters, the old debts, the failed investments, the loans. History repeating itself. Does Lauren know? Most of it. I folded my hands. And you thought my house would fix everything. He turned toward me. No. But his eyes said otherwise. I spoke quietly. How much debt? He sat down again. His voice became almost a whisper. Almost 200,000. The room became silent. $200,000. I suddenly understood the panic, the urgency, the pressure, the plans, the realtor, the retirement brochures, everything. He covered his face with his hands. I didn't know what to do. My heart broke, because for the first time in many months, I wasn't seeing the man who manipulated me. I was seeing my son, scared, ashamed, lost. You could have told me. I couldn't. Why? He looked at me, because Dad already thought I was a failure. The words hit me unexpectedly. No. He paid my debts. He helped you. He stopped trusting me. I thought about Robert's letters. Perhaps Ethan had felt that disappointment. Perhaps he had carried it for years. I wanted to fix everything. By selling my house. He lowered his eyes. I thought eventually you'd move anyway. Did you ask me? No. Did you tell me? No. The silence between us felt enormous. Then I asked the question that had lived inside me for months. Did you move money? His head lifted immediately. What? My accounts. No. Did you try? He didn't answer. And that answer frightened me more than words. I stood up, walked into Robert's office, returned carrying the folder, Robert's letters, the will, the documents. I placed them on the table. Ethan stared. What is this? Your father. His face became pale. He recognized the handwriting immediately. I handed him the letter. He read quietly. As his eyes moved down the page, tears appeared. He knew. I answered softly. He worried. His hands trembled. He talked to Helen. Yes. He closed his eyes. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Then, he never told me. He hoped he was wrong. The tears finally came. My son cried at my kitchen table. Not loudly, not dramatically, simply a man who had spent too many years carrying shame. I never wanted to hurt you. I believed him. Strangely, I truly did. Because people do not always destroy others out of cruelty. Sometimes they do it out of fear, out of desperation, out of believing they deserve something, out of convincing themselves that the end justifies the means. You took choices away from me. He nodded. I know. You spoke to the bank. Another nod. You contacted a realtor. He looked down. Yes. You discussed moving me. His voice cracked. Yes. The truth sat between us. No more excuses. No more protection. No more pretending. Just truth. And truth often hurts more than lies. After several minutes, Ethan finally spoke. I thought the inheritance would come to me. The sentence echoed through the kitchen. I know. When Dad left everything to you, I panicked. I looked at Robert's photograph on the shelf. He had known. Not everything, but enough. I thought eventually it would all be mine. I answered quietly. It never belonged to you. More tears. I know. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight slowly began appearing through the clouds. For the first time in months, we were no longer talking about houses, or documents, or retirement communities. We were talking about pain, failure, fear, and disappointment. Things far more dangerous than money. Finally, Ethan looked at me. What happens now? The question hung in the room, because neither of us knew. I loved my son. That had never changed. But trust had broken, and broken things require time. I reached across the table, placed my hand over his. You tell me the truth. His eyes filled again. All of it. All of it. He nodded slowly. For nearly 2 hours he spoke. The business losses, the debts, the credit cards, the second mortgage, the collection notices, the arguments with Lauren, the fear of losing everything. And somewhere along the way, he had begun seeing my inheritance not as my security, but as his rescue. When he finally finished, he looked exhausted. I don't know how to fix this. Neither did I. But for the first time in many months, we were no longer standing on opposite sides of a lie. We were sitting together inside the truth. And sometimes, truth is where healing finally begins. But forgiveness would be much harder, because one question still remained unanswered. Had my son only planned to save himself? Or had he actually been willing to take everything from me? And before this story could end, I needed to know. The morning after Ethan confessed, I expected to feel relief. Instead, I felt exhausted. For months, I had carried fear. For weeks, I had carried suspicion. And now, I carried the truth. The truth was strangely heavier than either. I sat alone in the kitchen drinking coffee while sunlight moved across the floor. Robert's chair sat empty beside me. Somewhere upstairs, hidden inside my dresser, rested the documents that had changed everything. Around 10 o'clock, Helen called. How are you? I laughed softly. I don't know. Did you speak with Ethan? Yes. And he admitted more than I expected. She was quiet. That's important. But not enough. What do you mean? I looked through the window toward the maple trees. He still hasn't told Lauren everything. Do you believe there are things you don't know? Yes. Helen paused. Then perhaps it's time everyone hears the same truth. 2 days later, I invited Ethan and Lauren to my house. I told them we needed to talk. I also invited Helen. Neither Ethan nor Lauren knew she would be there. At 3 o'clock, their car pulled into the driveway. Emma came as well. I was glad, because somehow, throughout all of this, she had become the one honest voice in our family. Ethan entered first. He looked tired. Lauren appeared nervous. Emma hugged me immediately. The 4 of us sat in the living room. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Then the front door opened. Helen entered carrying a leather folder. Lauren's face immediately changed. Ethan! He looked equally surprised. I didn't know she was coming. I answered calmly. I asked her. The room became very quiet. Helen sat beside me. She placed the folder on the coffee table. Lauren looked at me. Daisy, what's happening? I folded my hands. The truth. Ethan lowered his eyes. I could see that he already knew. Perhaps he had known for several days. Perhaps he understood that this moment was inevitable. Helen opened the file. Daisy asked me to review Robert Marshall's estate documents. Lauren looked at Ethan. He remained silent. Helen continued. Robert's will clearly states that all assets remain under Daisy Marshall's control during her lifetime. Lauren blinked. What? She turned toward her husband. Ethan. He still said nothing. Helen carefully placed copies of the documents onto the table. The family home belongs to Daisy. She turned another page. The financial accounts belong to Daisy. Another page. The investments belong to Daisy. The silence became unbearable. Lauren looked at Ethan again. You told me, he finally spoke. I thought eventually. You told me the house would become ours. His voice broke. I thought Dad planned that. Helen answered quietly. He did not. Emma sat perfectly still. I reached for her hand. She squeezed mine tightly. Lauren's eyes began filling with tears. You said your mother wanted to move. Ethan covered his face. I thought she would. You said she couldn't manage alone. Nobody spoke, because everyone now understood the difference between assumptions and truth. Helen continued. There are additional concerns. Ethan slowly looked up. She placed the bank documents on the table. Several financial authorizations were obtained, while Mrs. Marshall did not fully understand their implications. Lauren stared. What does that mean? Olivia's words returned to me. You deserve to understand exactly what you signed. Helen answered carefully. It means Daisy signed documents that granted authority she did not knowingly intend to grant. Lauren looked horrified. Ethan, he whispered. I was trying to help. The same sentence, the same explanation. But now nobody believed it, because help does not require secrecy. Help does not involve realtors. Help does not involve retirement apartments. Help does not involve moving money. Lauren stood up. How much debt? Ethan remained silent. How much? His voice barely worked. Almost 200,000. The room exploded. What? Lauren stepped backward. You told me 60. Ethan looked away. I couldn't tell you. Emma began crying. Dad! I pulled her close. The sound of her crying broke something inside me. Because she was the innocent one, she had done nothing except love all of us. Lauren sat down slowly. You lied to me. He said nothing. You lied to your mother. Silence. You lied to everyone. His shoulders collapsed. For the first time, I no longer saw a man defending himself. I saw a man whose lies had finally become too heavy to carry. Helen spoke gently. Daisy has the right to revoke the authority documents. Ethan nodded. Okay. The property remains hers. Another nod. Any future decisions belong solely to Daisy. He whispered, I understand. The room became quiet again. Then something happened that I never expected. Emma stood up. She walked to her father, and she asked, Did you want Grandma to leave her house? Ethan looked at his daughter. Tears ran down his face. No. Then why? He couldn't answer immediately. Because how do you explain desperation to a child? How do you explain fear, debt, pride, shame? Finally, he whispered, I thought I could fix everything. Emma cried harder. But you hurt Grandma. Those words hurt him more than anything else that afternoon. Because they were true. I looked at my son, 42 years old, broken, ashamed, no longer pretending. And suddenly, I remembered the little boy who once came to me after breaking a window with a baseball. He cried because he thought I would stop loving him. I hadn't, and I wouldn't stop now. But love and trust are not the same thing. I stood up. Everyone looked at me. For months, people had spoken for me, decided for me, protected me. Now it was finally my turn. I love you, Ethan. His eyes filled again. But this house is mine. He nodded. Your father's money was left to me. Another nod. I will not leave my home. I understand. You will not make decisions for me. His voice cracked. I know. I walked toward him, placed my hand against his face. The same face I kissed when he was born. The same face I kissed before his first day of school. The same face now covered with tears. You are still my son. He began crying openly. But you must save yourself. For several minutes, nobody moved. Outside, the afternoon sun had broken through the clouds. Inside, years of secrets finally lay exposed. The inheritance, the debts, the lies, the fear, the disappointment, everything. And as I looked around my living room, I realized something important. Robert had not left me money. He had left me truth. Because truth was the only thing strong enough to save our family, even if it first had to break it apart. The house felt strangely quiet after everyone left. Helen had gone first. Lauren took Emma home. Ethan remained in the driveway for several minutes, sitting inside his truck without starting the engine. Through the front window, I could see him staring at the steering wheel. Eventually, he drove away. And for the first time in many months, I sat alone in complete silence. No arguments, no secrets, no questions, only truth. I walked through the living room slowly. Robert's photograph still sat beside the fireplace. The evening sunlight touched the frame. I found myself speaking to him again. It's over. But of course it wasn't. The truth had come out. Yet consequences were only beginning. The next morning, Lauren called. Her voice sounded exhausted. Daisy? Yes. I'm sorry. I remained quiet. She began crying. I didn't know everything. Part of me believed her. Part of me didn't. I knew Ethan was worried about money. She paused. But I didn't know how much. You wanted me to move. A long silence. I thought it was what Ethan wanted. Did you ask me? No. Her voice broke. I'm sorry. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she said something unexpected. "He slept on the couch." I frowned. "What?" "He didn't sleep all night." The image hurt me, not because I wanted him punished, because he was still my son, no matter what he had done. 2 days later, Emma came to visit. Lauren dropped her off. The teenager seemed quieter than usual. We spent the afternoon baking cookies. For several hours, neither of us mentioned the family meeting. Finally, while washing dishes, she spoke. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Is Dad a bad person?" The question nearly broke my heart. "No." "But he lied." "Yes." She looked down. "Then how is he not bad?" Children often ask the questions adults avoid. I dried my hands. "People can do bad things without becoming bad people." She thought about that. "Will you forgive him?" I looked out the kitchen window. The maple trees moved gently in the wind. "I don't know yet." That was the truth. Love had never disappeared. Trust had. And rebuilding trust is much slower than breaking it. That Friday evening, someone knocked at my door. Ethan, alone. He looked terrible. His eyes were red. His clothes wrinkled. For a moment, he reminded me of himself at 16 after his first heartbreak. "Can I come in?" I nodded. We sat at the kitchen table. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he placed an envelope in front of me. "What is this, copies?" I opened it. Bank statements, credit card balances, loan documents, collection notices, everything. Every debt, every account, every problem. My eyes moved slowly across the pages. The numbers were worse than I expected. Much worse. Nearly $240,000. My stomach tightened. "How?" He rubbed his face. "The business." "What business?" "The expansion." I remembered years earlier when he spoke excitedly about growing his company. New equipment, additional employees, a larger warehouse. Apparently, things had gone terribly wrong. "Why didn't you tell me?" He laughed bitterly. "Because Dad already thought I was irresponsible." "No." "He paid my debts." "He loved you." "He stopped believing in me." His voice cracked. I suddenly understood something I had not fully seen before. Ethan had spent years trying to prove himself, to Robert, to himself, perhaps even to me. When his business failed, the shame became unbearable. Then Robert died. The inheritance remained with me. And somewhere inside his fear, my son convinced himself that the money was already his. Not because he hated me, because he was drowning. He looked at me. "I called the realtor." "I know." "I canceled everything." I remained silent. "I revoked the paperwork at the bank." I looked up. "What?" Helen prepared the forms. For the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders relax. He continued. "I want you to have everything." The sentence sounded painfully simple, because it should never have been necessary. The following week, something changed. Ethan began visiting again, but differently. He no longer asked about finances. He no longer discussed the house. He no longer brought brochures. Instead, he repaired the porch steps. He fixed a leaking faucet. He mowed the lawn. And when he finished, he simply went home. No pressure, no discussions, no plans. One afternoon, while painting the fence, he finally said, "I'm selling the boat." I looked at him. "Your father's boat?" He nodded. Robert had given him the fishing boat nearly 10 years earlier. Ethan loved it. Why? I owe money. I understood. For the first time, he was solving his own problems. Not mine. His. A few days later, Lauren visited again. She seemed embarrassed. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. I'm sorry for treating your home like a solution instead of your home. I should have protected your place in this family instead of helping pressure you. I hope one day you can forgive me. Love, Lauren. I folded the letter carefully because forgiveness had begun quietly entering the house. Not completely, not yet, but slowly. The biggest surprise came from Emma. One Saturday afternoon, she sat beside me on the porch. Dad cries now. I smiled softly. Sometimes adults need to. He never used to. I thought about that. Perhaps Ethan had spent his entire life trying to appear strong, trying to appear successful, trying to become the man he thought Robert wanted him to be, and perhaps that burden had eventually broken him. 2 weeks later, he came to dinner. Just the two of us. Afterward, we sat on the porch watching fireflies. Finally, he said, I read Dad's letter again. I looked at him. He wasn't trying to hurt me. No. He was trying to protect you. Yes. He nodded slowly. I understand now. The silence between us felt peaceful. Not healed, but peaceful. Then he asked the question I had been waiting for. Can you ever trust me again? I looked at the stars beginning to appear above the trees. Trust. Such a simple word. Such a difficult thing. I don't know. He lowered his eyes. But I want to. His eyes filled with tears. Because sometimes hope is more powerful than forgiveness. And for the first time since Robert died, I felt something changing inside our family. Not everything. The damage was real. The pain was real. But so was love. And perhaps love, when mixed with truth, can rebuild things that lies nearly destroy. As Ethan drove away that evening, I remained on the porch. The same porch where Robert and I had spent countless summer nights. The same porch Ethan once played on as a child. The same house everyone thought I would lose. I looked toward the front yard. The maple trees stood quietly beneath the moonlight. Robert planted them to mark Ethan's life, and suddenly I realized something. Trees survive storms. Branches break. Leaves fall. Sometimes damage lasts for years. But if the roots remain alive, healing is still possible. And perhaps our family still had roots. Perhaps that was what Robert had hoped for all along. Summer arrived quietly. For the first time since Robert's death, I noticed the seasons changing. The roses along the front walkway began blooming again. The maple trees grew thick with leaves. The evenings became warm enough for the porch swing Robert had built nearly 20 years earlier. Life, despite everything, continued. And somehow our family did too. Ethan still came every Saturday. Not because I asked, not because he felt obligated, simply because he wanted to. He repaired broken fence posts, painted the garage door, replaced old gutters. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we worked in silence. The silence no longer felt painful. One morning, while we were cleaning Robert's workshop, Ethan picked up his father's hammer. He turned it slowly in his hands. Dad taught me with this. I smiled. He taught both of us. He looked around the garage. I haven't been in here since the funeral. Neither had I until recently. The workshop still smelled like sawdust, old varnish, motor oil. Robert. Ethan sat down at the workbench. For several minutes, he said nothing. Then he spoke quietly. I was angry with him. I looked up. Your father? He nodded. For years. The confession surprised me. Why? He didn't trust me. I sat beside him. He loved you. I know. But he saw things in me that I didn't want to admit. The hidden letters suddenly came back to me. Robert had worried, not because he stopped loving his son, because he understood him. Sometimes parents see the storms inside their children long before anyone else does. Ethan looked down at the hammer. I spent my whole life trying to prove him wrong. And a sad smile appeared. I proved him right. I touched his shoulder. No. He looked at me. You made mistakes. His eyes filled slightly. There's a difference. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Lauren invited me to lunch, just the two of us. We met at a small cafe downtown. At first, the conversation felt awkward. Months of tension sat between us. Finally, she spoke. I owe you an apology. I stirred my coffee. You already apologized. Not enough. Her voice trembled. I saw your house as an answer. She looked down. I stopped seeing it as your home. I remained quiet, because she was right. I was scared. I know. Our finances became terrifying. She wiped her eyes. And Ethan kept saying that someday the house would belong to him. There it was, the belief, the expectation, the inheritance that had existed in their minds long before Robert died. When Robert left everything to you, Ethan fell apart. I nodded. He never said that? He wouldn't. She looked at me. He loved his father more than anyone. I knew. Perhaps that was partly why this had happened. Robert's death had not only taken away a husband, it had taken away Ethan's safety. The man who always rescued him. The man who quietly paid debts. The man who solved problems. And after Robert died, Ethan had looked toward the inheritance the same way a drowning man looks toward shore. Not because the shore belongs to him, because he is desperate to survive. Several days later, Emma spent an entire weekend with me. We baked pies, watched old movies, worked in the garden. On Saturday evening, she discovered Robert's collection of fishing photographs. She sat beside me. Grandpa looked happy. He was. She pointed to a picture of Robert and Ethan holding fish beside the old boat. Dad looked happy too. I smiled. He was. She became quiet. Will we be okay? The question carried far more weight than a 14-year-old should have to ask. I put my arm around her. Families get lost sometimes. She leaned against me. But if people tell the truth, they can usually find their way home. The following week, Ethan asked if we could visit the cemetery, together. It was the first time either of us had gone since the funeral. The summer grass had grown thick around the headstone. Robert Marshall, beloved husband, beloved father, beloved friend. Ethan stood silently for several minutes. Then tears began rolling down his face. I failed you. The wind moved softly through the trees. He lowered his head. I'm sorry. I stood beside my son. For the first time since Robert died, I saw not a grown man, not a father, not a businessman, only a son grieving his father. The same little boy who once sat beside Robert while learning to fish. The same child who followed him through hardware stores. The same teenager who wanted his father's approval. He had never truly stopped being that boy. As we walked back toward the car, Ethan finally asked, Do you think Dad would forgive me? I looked at the sky. at the sunlight, at the quiet cemetery. Your father loved you. That isn't what I asked. No, I smiled softly. But it's the answer. Because Robert had known. He had worried. He had prepared. Yet nowhere in his letters did he express anger. Only concern. Only protection. Only love. One evening in late August, I sat alone on the porch. The sun was setting. The maple trees glowed orange in the fading light. Robert's chair beside me remained empty. Yet for the first time, the emptiness did not feel unbearable. I realized something important. I had spent months believing this story was about inheritance, about money, about property. But it wasn't. It was about fear. Fear of aging, fear of losing family, fear of failure, fear of disappointing the people we love, and perhaps, most of all, fear of being left alone. My phone rang. Ethan. Hi, Mom. Hi. I wanted to tell you something. What is it? I accepted a second job. I smiled. Good. I'm going to pay everything back. You don't owe me. I owe myself. Those words stayed with me because that was exactly what Robert had wanted. Not money, responsibility, not inheritance, character, not rescue, growth. As darkness settled over the yard, I looked toward the house. My house. The home I almost lost. The home Robert protected. The home where our family had nearly broken apart. And somehow, against all expectations, it had become the place where healing finally began. Robert's greatest inheritance had never been money. It was the chance he gave us to tell the truth. And little by little, we were learning how to live with it. Autumn arrived quietly. The maple trees Robert planted had turned shades of gold, orange, and deep red. Leaves covered the front yard, and every morning I found myself standing on the porch with a cup of coffee watching the wind move through the branches. Almost a year had passed since Robert died, and somehow I had survived the year I thought would destroy me. The house felt different now. Not because anything had changed, because I had. I no longer walked through the rooms as a widow who had lost everything. I walked through them as the woman Robert believed I could become. Strong, capable, and no longer afraid. One afternoon in October, I received a phone call from Ethan. Mom! Hi. His voice sounded uncertain. Can I come by? Of course. He arrived alone. The old truck looked older now. So did he. Over the previous months, he had taken extra work, sold his fishing boat, and begun meeting with financial counselors. Lauren had returned to full-time work. They had reduced expenses, sold unnecessary things, and slowly started rebuilding their finances. None of it happened quickly. But for the first time in years, Ethan was facing his problems instead of hiding them. He carried no folders, no paperwork, no brochures. Only a small cardboard box. We sat in the living room. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, he placed the box on the coffee table. What's this? He smiled weakly. I found these while cleaning. Inside were old photographs, school report cards, Little League trophies, Father's Day cards, a broken toy car, a fishing lure Robert had given him at age 12. I picked up one photograph. Robert stood beside Ethan near the lake. Ethan couldn't have been older than 8. Both were smiling. I thought these belonged here, he said. My eyes filled with tears. Because he wasn't returning objects. He was returning memories. For a while, we looked through the photographs together. He laughed at old haircuts. I remembered birthdays. We talked about Robert. The conversations no longer hurt the same way. Grief had softened. Finally, Ethan became quiet. He looked toward the fireplace. Mom. Yes? I owe you something. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. His voice trembled. I never apologized properly. I remained silent. He took a deep breath. I was selfish. The room became very still. I convinced myself that I deserved things that didn't belong to me. He looked down at his hands. I used your grief. Tears appeared in his eyes. I made plans without asking you. Another tear. I treated your home like it was already mine. He looked at me, and I hurt you. I felt my own tears coming, because these were the words I had waited months to hear. Not excuses, not explanations, responsibility. I don't expect you to trust me. He wiped his eyes. I don't even expect forgiveness. He laughed softly. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. I looked at my son, 42 years old, gray beginning to appear at his temples, lines around his eyes. The little boy who once held my hand crossing the street. The teenager who broke his arm falling from his bicycle. The young man who cried at his wedding. And the man who had nearly destroyed our relationship because he was drowning in fear. Your father loved you. His eyes closed. I know. He worried about you. Another nod. I know. He never gave up on you. Tears rolled down his face. I know. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Outside, leaves fell from the trees. The same trees Robert planted. The same trees that had witnessed our entire lives. Finally, Ethan asked the question he had been carrying for months. Can you forgive me? I looked toward Robert's photograph, then back at my son. Forgiveness. Such a difficult word, because forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not pretending something never happened. It is not restoring everything overnight. Forgiveness is choosing not to live inside the pain forever. I reached for his hand. I already have. He began crying openly. But trust takes longer. He nodded immediately. I know. And some things will never be the same. I know. I squeezed his hand. But you are my son. Those 4 words seemed to break something inside him. He leaned forward, and for the first time since Robert died, my son hugged me and cried against my shoulder. Not as a businessman, not as a husband, not as a father, only as my child. And I held him exactly the way I had held him when he was 5 years old. Because some parts of motherhood never disappear. After he left, I sat alone on the porch. The sun slowly disappeared behind the trees. The air smelled like autumn. I thought about everything that had happened. The documents, the lies, the fear, the inheritance, the pain. For months, I believed the story was about money. But money had only exposed something deeper. Fear, shame, loss. The desperate need to be rescued. Robert had left me his house, his savings, his investments. But those things were never his greatest inheritance. His greatest inheritance was wisdom. He had trusted me. He had protected me. And even after death, he had given me the strength to stand on my own. Several weeks later, our family gathered for Thanksgiving. The first one without Robert. I was terrified. But somehow, it became beautiful. Emma helped cook. Lauren set the table. Ethan carved the turkey using his father's knife. Before dinner, everyone became quiet. Ethan stood. He looked around the room. Then he said, "Dad taught me that family comes before money." His voice trembled. It took me too long to understand. Nobody spoke, because everyone understood. After dinner, Emma sat beside me. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Grandpa would be happy." I looked around the table. My son laughing, Lauren smiling, the empty chair that still belonged to Robert. Perhaps she was right, because families do not survive by avoiding pain. They survive by telling the truth. As darkness settled outside, I walked to the front porch. The maple leaves covered the ground. The house stood quietly behind me. My home, the home I almost lost, the home my husband protected, the home that taught me something I will carry for the rest of my life. Never surrender your voice. Never confuse love with control. And never believe that growing older means giving away your right to decide your own future. Because sometimes the greatest inheritance we leave behind is not money. It is the courage we teach the people we love.